That morning, a luxurious carriage stopped on one of the quietest streets in Mayfair. The man who stepped out was middle-aged, tall, and well-dressed. But the most striking thing was his face. You couldn't read anything on it. This man was the Duke of Ashford, one of the richest dukes in London, one of the most well-known, and as everyone knew, one of the most notorious womanizers. He walked to the door and knocked. Two boys across the street looked at him and whispered to each other. The man had come to this door before, not once but twice. The door opened slightly. A young footman appeared. The Duke spoke calmly. "Tell Miss Whitmore that the Duke of Ashford is waiting." The footman went inside. The Duke waited. Across the street, the curtains of a window parted. A neighbor was watching. There was a long silence. Then the footman returned. His face was bright red, and he didn't seem to know what to say. "Sir, Miss Whitmore will not receive you." The Duke did not react at all. He turned, walked back to his carriage, got in, and left. Everyone on that street who saw it talked about it that day. Within a week, all of London had heard. The most powerful duke in London had been rejected at the door of an ordinary house. But the interesting part is this. It wasn't the first time. The Duke had come to this door 3 times, and 3 times he had received the same answer. So who was this woman? Why did she keep refusing him? And why was the Duke so persistent? I will tell you everything. Let's start from the beginning. Let's begin with the Duke of Ashford. His full name was James Edward Ashford, 38 years old, the only son of the Ashford family, and the sole heir to the family's centuries-old title, lands and fortune. On paper, he was the perfect husband, but in London, everyone knew the truth. In those days, the social seasons were extremely important. They began every spring. Balls, dinners, receptions, horse races. The wealthy families of London prepared their daughters during these seasons to meet a suitable husband. It was almost like a business, and every season, James Ashford would appear. He was handsome, intelligent, charming. He danced well, spoke well. Women admired him. Mothers tried to bring their daughters close to him. And he would show interest for a few weeks, sometimes a few months. Then one morning he would simply be gone. He never said anything cruel. He never rejected anyone openly. He just disappeared. Soon he would be seen at another ball with another woman. This had gone on for years. His family had grown tired of it long ago. His mother brought up marriage at every opportunity. "James, you are 38 years old. The Ashford name must continue." James would listen politely and avoid the subject just as politely. The older lords in the House of Lords would whisper to each other, "Ashford still hasn't married. What is he waiting for?" Of course, no one said it to his face, but everyone talked. Now the question must be asked, was he a bad man? No, he wasn't. He didn't lie to anyone. He never told a woman, "I will marry you." He didn't threaten anyone or deliberately hurt anyone. He simply didn't take it seriously. Not any woman, not any relationship, because no one had ever challenged him. Every door opened for him. Every woman smiled at him. Every family welcomed him at their door. When everything you want is always placed in front of you, nothing feels valuable anymore. Now let's meet Clara Whitmore. A few years earlier, Clara had been the daughter of one of London's respectable families. The Whitmore family was not especially wealthy, but they were well established. They had a respected name, a fine house, and a good social circle. Then everything changed. Their father was ruined at the gambling tables. First small debts, then larger ones. One morning, they woke up and the house was for sale. The family name was stained, their social circle scattered. Clara was 24 at the time. Many young women would have collapsed under such circumstances. They would have cried, complained, and depended on someone else to save them. Clara did not. She quietly gathered what she had left and moved into a small house. To support herself, she began giving private lessons to the children of wealthy families. literature, French, piano. She did not complain to anyone. She did not ask anyone for help. But in London's eyes, she was no longer the same. Society slowly forgot about her. She was no longer invited to balls. Old acquaintances greeted her if they met her on the street, but rarely looked back. Clara saw this. She understood it, and she did not care. And these two people would soon meet at a ball. One man who had always found every door open and had learned to value nothing. One woman who had seen every door close and still remained standing. It isn't hard to guess what might happen, but how it happened, that is the story to tell. That November, the Hartwell family, one of London's oldest and most established families, hosted a grand ball. Hartwell balls were always special. Only invited guests were allowed inside. The list was prepared with great care. London's most distinguished names, the most established families. What was Clara doing there? An old friend had invited her, a woman named Margaret. Before Clara's father had lost everything, they had been close friends. Margaret had not forgotten those days. "It's just one evening," she had said. "Come, get some air." Clara had been reluctant. She knew how it would be. Old acquaintances would see her. There would be looks. There would be whispers. But Margaret insisted, and Clara went. When she entered the ballroom, she tried to make herself as small as possible. She moved to a corner and stood beside Margaret, quietly observing the room. There was music. Women were dancing, men were raising their glasses. Everything glittered with light. Clara watched but felt nothing. This world no longer belonged to her. James Ashford arrived late that evening. The moment he stepped through the doors, no one failed to notice him. It was simply the effect he had. When he entered a room, the atmosphere seemed to change. Women straightened, conversations paused. James was aware of this, but he never showed that he was aware of it. That was part of his skill. He began moving through the room with a glass in hand. He greeted acquaintances, exchanged a few words, laughed. Then something caught his eye. In the corner stood a woman who was not dancing with anyone. She was simply looking out the window. Everyone in the room looked at him. This woman did not. James watched her from a distance for a while. He didn't recognize her. Or perhaps he did and simply couldn't remember. Both were possible. Then he walked over to her. "You haven't danced tonight," he said. Clara turned her head and looked at him. She immediately recognized who he was. In London, there was hardly anyone who didn't. "I haven't," she said. That was all. No thank you. No smile. James was slightly surprised, though he did not show it. "James Ashford," he said, bowing his head slightly. Clara studied him for a moment. "I know who you are," she said. "There's no need for introductions." Then she turned back and looked out the window again. James stood there for a moment. This had never happened to him before. Not just rejection, but being dismissed so simply, so naturally. He had faced resistance before, of course, but this was different. This woman wasn't mocking him. She wasn't angry. She simply wasn't interested. He stood there for a moment longer, then turned and went to speak with someone else. But that night, he couldn't get her out of his mind. The ball ended. Everyone left. As James was getting into his carriage, he asked his footman, the woman standing in the corner, by the window, who was she? A few hours later, the answer had been found. "The Whitmore family, sir. Clara Whitmore, her father a few years ago." "I know," James said. "That's enough." He asked nothing more, but a week later, 2 new names appeared on Clara's list of students. The children of 2 wealthy families, both of them clients of the same lawyer who had recommended Clara. That lawyer happened to be the Ashford family's lawyer. Clara did not know this yet. The families came, they discussed the fee, and they agreed. Clara was pleased. Her work had improved slightly. Not for a moment did it cross her mind that the Duke of Ashford had anything to do with it. After that day, James Ashford began to piece together everything he knew about Clara Whitmore. He already knew the story of her father's debts. The house had been sold. The family had fallen apart. Clara now lived in a small house and supported herself by giving private lessons. None of this was difficult to learn. In London, everyone knew everyone else's story, but there was one thing James couldn't understand. Why did this woman seem so calm? After a fall like that, most people either broke down or became a burden to those around them. Clara had done neither. She had simply continued with her life. That thought stayed with him. 3 weeks passed. One morning, James got up, dressed, and went to Clara's house. He knocked on the door. The same young footman opened it. James gave his name. The footman went inside, then returned. "Please come in, sir." James stepped inside. The sitting room was small but orderly. Everything was in its place. There were few decorations, just books in one corner and students' notebooks on the table. Clara entered a few minutes later. She was wearing a simple dress. Her hair was tied back. She wore no jewelry. She looked at James. She was surprised, though she tried not to show it. "What do you want?" she asked. It wasn't rude. It was simply direct. James suggested they sit. Clara remained standing, so they spoke while standing. James spoke plainly. He said that he wanted to marry her, that he was serious, that he had looked into her past and her family situation, and that none of it mattered to him. Clara listened. She didn't interrupt him once. When James finished, Clara was silent for a moment. Then she asked slowly, "How many women did you see last season?" James was surprised. He had not expected a question like that. "What does that have to do with this conversation?" he said. "It has everything to do with it," Clara replied. "I know who you are. Every woman in London knows who you are. Every season there is someone new. None of them are beside you the following season. And now you come to me with a marriage proposal. Why me? Why now?" James tried to answer. "People change. They can," Clara said, "but proving that you've changed is something else. I don't know you. You don't know me. We spoke for a few minutes at a ball. That is not a good enough reason to propose marriage." She paused, then added, "No." As James left the house that day, he felt something strange. He wasn't angry. He was somewhat surprised. But more than anything, he was thinking. The woman was right. He had to admit that honestly. He didn't really know her. He had simply found her interesting. And because he was interested, he had gone to her. That had always been enough, but for this woman it wasn't. People around him noticed that something had changed that week. James attended fewer balls. He spent less time surrounded by women. Sometimes in the evenings he sat alone in his library. His mother asked him, "Are you well, James?" "I'm well," he said. His mother did not believe him, but she had grown tired of asking questions. 4 months passed. During those 4 months, James Ashford did something different. He did not go to Clara's door again. He did not chase her. He did not send gifts. He simply waited. But he did not spend those 4 months doing nothing. They had a mutual acquaintance, Margaret, the woman who had taken Clara to the ball. James had known Margaret for years. They occasionally met at the same gatherings. One day, James said something to Margaret, carefully, deliberately. "You know Clara Whitmore. She is an intelligent woman." Margaret was surprised. "Yes, I know her. Why?" "I was simply curious," James said. He said nothing more, but Margaret was a perceptive woman, and she genuinely cared about Clara. For the rest of that winter, Margaret occasionally arranged small dinners, 4 or 5 guests at most, intimate gatherings. She invited Clara. She invited James. At the first dinner, Clara stiffened when she saw James. But that evening, James did not give her special attention. He spoke with everyone at the table. He laughed, listened, behaved normally. Clara was slightly surprised. At the second dinner, she was more at ease. A topic came up at the table. Literature. Clara shared a thought. James listened carefully and responded. He had clearly thought about his answer. He wasn't speaking just for the sake of speaking. Clara noticed that. At the third dinner, as the evening ended, Clara and James found themselves alone for a few minutes. By chance, or perhaps by Margaret's design, neither of them knew for certain. They talked. Clara mentioned her father's library, how she had spent hours there as a child, how, when the house was sold, what hurt her most was losing the books. James listened quietly. "Did you sell them all?" he asked. "I took some with me," Clara said, "the ones I could carry." She said nothing more. James did not ask further. That night, as Clara walked home, she had to admit something to herself. This man was not exactly who she had thought he was. At least, the man she had seen over the past few months was not. He listened. He truly listened. He did not speak just to fill silence. And most importantly, he did not treat her differently. He gave the same attention to everyone at the table. This unsettled her slightly. But she did not ask herself why. It was February. One day, James sent Clara a note. A short note. Not through Margaret this time. Directly to Clara. "May I invite you for tea, just to talk?" Clara read the note. She set it aside. She waited a day. Then she wrote back. Very well. They met in a small tea room. James was different that day. Less showy. Less like the Duke of Ashford. They talked for an hour. About books, about London, about how women of that time were denied proper education. Clara had strong opinions on the subject. She expressed them without hesitation. James did not argue. He listened. Occasionally he asked questions. When the tea was finished, neither of them wanted to stand up, but they did. As they stepped outside, James stopped. "There is something I need to tell you," he said. Clara waited. "I am trying to change. Do you see that?" Clara looked at him for a moment. It was an honest question. It deserved an honest answer. "I see it," she said. "But trying is one thing. Being is another. I am not certain yet." James nodded. He did not press. But as he walked her home, he made the proposal again. Quietly, without pressure. Clara said no again. This time she did not close the door sharply. This time she gave a faint, bittersweet smile. Because this no was different from the first. The first time she had said no to a stranger. This time she had said no to someone she had begun to know, and that was much harder. It was the end of March. That week, a rumor began to spread in London. It spread quickly. Such things always did. The Duke of Ashford had been seen with an old acquaintance. A widow. I will not mention her name, but everyone in society knew who she was. Years ago, she and James had had a brief relationship. It had ended. But for London, ended was never enough. No one knew exactly what had happened. Were they in a carriage, in a park, or did they simply meet at a gathering? The details changed with every person who repeated the story. But once the rumor began to circulate, it took on the weight of truth. Clara heard about it from Margaret. Margaret came to visit, sat down, and told her. The more she spoke, the more troubled she looked. "Perhaps there is nothing to it," she said. "Perhaps they simply ran into each other by chance." Clara listened. She asked nothing. She questioned nothing. After Margaret left, Clara stood up, went into the kitchen, and placed a kettle on the stove. What did she feel? She was not surprised. That was the heavy part. She had expected this. Somewhere inside her, she had always expected it. The man had not changed. He could not change. Someone who had lived that way for years could not become someone else overnight. She felt a little angry with herself. She should not have allowed things to become this close. She should not have listened so much, talked so much. After the second refusal, she should have kept her distance. She made her tea, sat down, looked out the window. That same week, James learned that the rumor had spread. At first, he did not care. London was never short of gossip. Worse lies had been told about him before. Then he thought of Clara. Had she heard the story? And, if she had, what did she think? He contacted Margaret and asked. Margaret was silent for a moment. Then she answered honestly. She heard, but she said nothing. She didn't even ask about it. James waited. Was she angry? No, Margaret said. And that's why I'm telling you this, James. She wasn't angry. She just looked as if she had expected it. as if she already knew something like this would happen. That night, James sat in his library for a long time. The sentence would not leave his mind, as if she already knew it would happen. What did that mean? It meant Clara did not trust him. They had spent months talking, listening to one another. He had told her he was trying to change. She had seen it, and yet she did not trust him. Now, James had to understand something. Was that her fault or his? He thought about it for a long time. The answer was obvious. It was his fault. He had lived that way for years. He had been that man for years. A few months of change could not erase that. In Clara's mind, that man still existed, and that man was the kind of man around whom such rumors appeared. Trying to change was not enough. Explaining that to Clara would not be enough either. It had to be proven. But how? A week later, James went to Clara's house. This time, the footman let him inside immediately. Clara was waiting in the sitting room. Her face was calm, not cold, not warm. James sat down. "I wanted to speak about the rumor you heard," he said. "There's no need," Clara replied. "There is," James said, "because I don't want you to misunderstand. I met that woman by chance, at a gathering. We spoke for 5 minutes. Nothing more." Clara looked at him. "I believe you," she said. James was surprised. "You believe me?" "I do," Clara said, "but that isn't the heart of the matter. Then what is?" Clara thought for a moment, searching for the right way to explain. "You are trying to change," she said at last. "I see that, I truly do, but I cannot wake up every morning wondering if the old James Ashford will return one day. That would exhaust me, and you don't deserve that. Neither do I." She paused. "Perhaps another woman could trust you. I cannot yet." James stood up. This time he felt something different inside him. It was a turning point. Because Clara had not been angry. She had not blamed him. She had simply spoken an honest truth, and that honesty shook him deeply. At the door he paused and turned. "I understand," he said simply. Then he left. That night James made a decision. Words were not working, proposals were not working, explanations were not working. He had to do something else. But what? At the beginning of April, James Ashford withdrew from London society. He stopped attending balls. He did not go to dinners or invitations. No one knew where he was. His mother knocked on his door, and the servants replied, "His lordship is not receiving visitors." London, of course, began to gossip. Was he ill? Had some urgent matter taken him away? Or was he ashamed because of the rumor about the widow? No one knew the truth. During that time, James quietly did a few things. First, he paid off a small portion of Clara's father's debts. He did not do it directly. It was handled anonymously through a lawyer. Clara's name did not appear in any documents. Second, through a trusted acquaintance, he recommended Clara to 2 families whose children needed a tutor. Those children began coming to her for lessons. Clara's income improved a little. Third, he remembered something from one of their conversations. Clara had once mentioned the books she had loved in her father's library when she was a child. James went to a bookseller and found clean new editions of those books. He did not send them to Clara. He simply set them aside. During this time, Clara heard nothing from James. The first week she did not notice. In the second week she asked Margaret, "Have you seen James recently?" Margaret said no. "He hasn't been around." Clara nodded. "All right," she said, but something tightened inside her. Something small. She tried not to think about it. Weeks passed. Every morning Clara woke up, gave her lessons, returned home. Her life continued. It was steady. But somewhere in her mind James remained. Why had he disappeared? Had he given up? Perhaps that was better. Perhaps she would finally feel relieved. But she did not. In the middle of May, Clara learned something. The mother of one of her new students came to speak about the fee. During the conversation, she said something casually. "The gentleman who recommended you to us was very kind. Do you know the Duke of Ashford? He directed us to you." Clara froze. "What did you say?" The woman repeated it. She explained that someone connected to James had recommended Clara. She said it with gratitude, with no other intention. The woman left. Clara sat at the table for a long time without moving. The next day, a letter arrived from her father's former lawyer. It was short. It explained that some of the debts had been paid by an anonymous benefactor. Clara read the letter. Then she read it again. After that, she stood up, put on her coat, and went outside. She went to James's house. She knocked on the door. The footman opened it. Clara gave her name. The footman went inside and returned. "Please, come in, miss." James was in his library. When he saw Clara, he stood up. He was surprised, though he tried not to show it. Clara entered. The door closed. She took 2 steps forward, then stopped. "Why did you do these things?" she asked. James did not answer immediately. "The debts, the students, I know about all of it." Clara's voice was calm, but filled with emotion. "Why?" James looked at her for a moment. "Not because I expected anything from you," he said. "I want you to know that. I asked for nothing in return." "Then why?" James thought for a moment, searching for the right words. "Because I could," he said, "and because you deserved it. There is no other reason." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. This man had come to her door 3 times. Each time he had spoken, explained, tried to convince her. Each time Clara had said no. Now, he had been gone for months. Quietly, without telling anyone, without expecting anything in return, he had done these things. And he had never come to say, "Look what I did." Clara had discovered it by chance. That was different. That was not something the old James Ashford would have done. Or perhaps, this was the real James Ashford. Someone no one had seen before. Someone James himself was only beginning to discover. Clara took a step forward. "May we sit in your library and talk?" she asked. Her voice trembled slightly. James was surprised. Of course. They sat. They talked. This conversation was different, quieter, slower, deeper. Evening came. Clara had to leave. At the door, she stopped and turned. "Do you still feel the same?" she asked. James understood what she meant. "Yes," he said. He added nothing more. Clara nodded and left. That night, Clara returned home. She sat at her desk. She took out a piece of paper and looked at it for a long time. Then she wrote a short note, a single sentence. "If you still wish it, this time, I am ready." She placed it in an envelope and sent it to James's house the next morning. When James received the note, he held it in his hand for a while. Then he put it in his pocket. That note never left his pocket for the rest of his life. In June of that year, London was shaken by news of a wedding. The Duke of Ashford was getting married. That alone was enough to cause a stir. But when people learned whom he was marrying, society was truly shaken. Clara Whitmore, the daughter of a fallen family, a woman who earned her living by giving private lessons, who had long since left the ballroom world behind, someone who had quietly disappeared from London's social life. How had this happened? Everyone talked, everyone had something to say. Some said, "That woman must have enchanted him." Others said, "Ashford has lost his mind." Mothers pitied their daughters. Old lords shook their heads. No one understood the truth. The wedding itself was small. James did not want a grand ceremony. Clara certainly would not have wanted one. Just a few close guests, a quiet church, a brief service. Margaret was there. She cried, partly from happiness, partly because she remembered the past. The day Clara's father had lost everything. The years Clara had stood on her own. And what did Clara feel as she stood in that church? Not fear, certainly not regret. Only this thought, quietly to herself. At last. After the wedding, London society talked about them for a while longer. Then another scandal appeared. Another rumor spread. Clara and James slowly disappeared from the conversation. For them, that was the best possible outcome. In the years that followed, life at the Ashford house changed. James was no longer the same man. Those who noticed were surprised. He attended fewer balls. In the evenings he stayed at home. He and Clara would talk for long hours, read together, or sometimes simply sit in the same room in comfortable silence. One day his mother approached Clara and whispered to her, "I don't know how you did it, but thank you." Clara smiled. "I didn't do anything," she said. "He did it himself." And Clara? Clara never fully returned to that old world. She did not go back to society balls. She did not disappear again into those circles. But she did not stop giving lessons either. Even after the marriage, she continued. James never objected. In fact, he supported her. In time, Clara founded a small school. It was for girls in the poorer districts of London. Reading, writing, basic mathematics, a little music. It was not a grand institution, but to Clara, it meant everything. James visited the school every week. Sometimes he only stood by the door. He did not go inside, he simply watched. Years passed. One day James fell ill. It was a long illness. In the end, they lost him. At the funeral, many of London's great names were present. Lords, dukes, earls. Long speeches were made. They spoke about the history of the Ashford family, its fortune, its title, its legacy. Clara did not hear any of it. She simply sat there. In her hand was a small piece of paper, yellowed, worn, and creased. They had taken it from James's pocket and given it to her. "If you still wish it, this time, I am ready." Her own handwriting. She had written it years ago. James had carried it with him ever since. Clara closed her hand around the paper. From the outside, no one would ever fully understand this story. How had London's most notorious duke changed? What had this woman done? In truth, Clara had done nothing. She had simply said no. At the right time, for the right reasons, to the right man. And that man, for the first time in his life, had understood that something truly worth having had to be earned. London has told many love stories, stories of wealth, poverty, titles, and scandals. But let me say this, the strongest stories often begin the same way, with a door, with a no, and with the quiet, unwavering dignity behind that no, like the dignity of Clara Whitmore.
Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Also, tell us what you thought of the story and what your thoughts are. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.